I moved into apartment 3C on the first day of July. The heat was unbearable that week, humid, sticky, the kind that clung to your skin like wet fabric. It was a last-minute rental in an old 3-story brick building on a forgotten residential street. The landlord, a man named Walter, was in his late 60s and looked like he'd lived in the building longer than the bricks themselves. He handed me the keys with barely a word and shuffled away with a limp. The apartment was nothing special: worn floors, high ceilings, a narrow kitchen, and a living room that looked out over the alley. The place smelled faintly of mildew and something metallic. Not enough to complain about, but just enough to notice. The fireplace was sealed shut with bricks, and all the windows had layers of chipped paint like aging scabs. The first 3 nights were uneventful. I spent my time unpacking, sweating through my clothes, and drinking cheap beer while I listened to the occasional shouts from the alley below. On the 4th night, something changed. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I woke up needing water. The air felt thicker than usual, like something was pressing down on me while I slept. I stumbled into the kitchen, turned on the light, and saw what I first assumed was steam near the sink. But it wasn't steam. It was too localized, hanging motionless in the air like a frozen breath. I stood there, blinking at it, wondering if I was still dreaming. Then I did something stupid. I breathed toward it. A second puff appeared, my own breath, and it mingled with the one already hanging in the air. I should have felt chilled. Instead, I felt watched, like whatever made that first puff of breath was still there, invisible, just out of reach. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I convinced myself it was some kind of illusion. Maybe condensation from the faucet. Maybe my tired brain playing tricks. I opened the windows, cleaned the kitchen, even checked the pipes under the sink. Nothing. But the next night, it happened again. This time, I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom. The mirror had a slight fog, not unusual given the humidity. But then I saw it again, that faint cloud in the air, just above my left shoulder in the mirror's reflection. I spun around, but the air behind me was clear. I looked back in the mirror. It was still there, unmoving, pale and weightless. I turned on the exhaust fan. Nothing changed. That's when I started documenting things. I'm not some paranormal nut or ghost hunter. I just wanted to make sense of it. I opened a note on my phone and started jotting down times, temperatures, locations of each appearance. July 5th, 2:43 a.m. Kitchen. Fog appeared near faucet. 83 degrees Fahrenheit. No draft. July 6th, 1:12 a.m. Bathroom. Mirror corner. 85 degrees Fahrenheit. No AC on. July 8th, 3:19 a.m. Bedroom. Near ceiling fan. Fan off. Mist hovered for 12 seconds. I tried capturing it on my phone. Most nights, nothing showed. But on July 9th, I finally caught it. A 7-second clip of mist forming in the upper right corner of the bathroom. It drifted downward and faded before hitting the floor. I showed it to a friend the next day. He shrugged. "Weird," he said. "Maybe you've got bad insulation." Bad insulation doesn't explain why I started hearing breathing. It started softly, barely perceptible. A slow inhale. A long exhale. At first I thought it was from the vents. But the building had no central air. I placed glasses over the vents to see if any pressure was coming through. Nothing. I even recorded audio one night. Played it back the next morning. It was there. 2 minutes and 12 seconds of faint breathing. Rhythmic human wrong. I live alone. No pets. No neighbors directly next to my walls. I started keeping the lights on. On July 11th, I woke up gagging. My throat burned. I ran to the sink to drink water and caught a glimpse of my reflection in the dark kitchen window. My breath fogged the glass. But something else did too beside me. Another cloud, not mine, rising and falling with a cadence not synced to mine. I turned the lights on. There was nothing there. That day, I called the landlord. I asked about the history of the unit. Had anyone complained before? He seemed hesitant, then muttered something about an old woman who used to live there. She died in the apartment, he said. Gas leak or something. Long time ago. Which room? Bathroom, I think. But like I said, long time ago. I asked if anyone else had rented it since. He paused. Yeah, he said. Couple of folks. Never stayed long. I hung up. That night, I slept with my phone recording again. I left it propped on my nightstand. When I listened the next morning, I didn't hear breathing. I heard whispering. Not words, just the tone of it. Like someone mouthing secrets just outside the microphone's range. I enhanced the volume. Still nothing coherent. But the rhythm of it was unmistakable, like a voice trying to push through water. I checked my room thoroughly. No leaks. No drafts. No mold. I even hired someone to inspect the insulation. Everything came back clean. The technician even joked, "You've got the tightest seals I've seen in this building." Then why was I shivering at night? Even during the day, I began to feel cold in short bursts, small moments where the air would dip 10 degrees, seemingly only around me. My skin would prickle, my breath would fog, and then it would stop. I became obsessed. I bought a temperature gun. I scanned every wall, every surface. The readings were normal, until they weren't. July 14th, 4:02 a.m. Reading taken at foot of my bed, 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Normal. 3 seconds later, 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Then 61 degrees Fahrenheit. Then 70 degrees Fahrenheit again. The drop was real, but only for seconds. Like something passed through. That's when the dream started. Always the same. I'm walking through my apartment, except the walls are wet, like someone's breathing on them constantly. Every step echoes. The floor sags. The air is heavy and full of whispering breath. I try to leave, but every door leads to the bathroom, and the mirror is black. I wake up gasping. Always around 3 a.m. The worst moment came on July 17th. I fell asleep on the couch after a long day. I remember waking up around 2:45 a.m., the room pitch dark. I couldn't move. Sleep paralysis. My eyes scanned the ceiling. That's when I saw it. Mist. Not just a puff. A shape. A human outline. Fog in the air like condensed breath. Upright. Motionless. Right at the foot of the couch. I blink hard. It didn't move. My body screamed to run, but I couldn't move. Tears ran down my face. The shape stood there, semi-transparent, breathing in sync with the soft exhale that filled the room. And then it vanished, slowly dispersing into the air like a sigh held too long. When I finally broke free, I ran into the hallway. Sat there until dawn, shaking. I've started to leave the apartment every night now. I spend hours at a diner down the street, watching the window fog with my actual breath, grateful it's mine alone. But every time I come home, I know the air is watching. I haven't slept in the bedroom for 3 nights. There's something in the air, something waiting, watching, breathing, and it doesn't need cold to show itself. There's something unnatural about the way silence grows in that apartment. It doesn't settle like normal quiet. It builds like pressure in a sealed container. Since that night on the couch, I've stopped trying to justify what's happening as coincidence. There's a presence in the air, something that breathes and watches and reacts. On the morning of July 18th, I returned home just after sunrise. I'd spent the night again at the diner, nursing burnt coffee until the sun filtered through the blinds. As I climbed the stairs to my unit, a chill greeted me 2 steps from my door. The hallway was sweltering. The cold was coming from my apartment. I hesitated before unlocking it. My hand trembled. The key felt colder than metal should. Inside, the air was dense. Not frigid, not exactly, but still wrong. It felt like I was stepping into the breath of something enormous, like being inside a lung that had been holding in air too long. There was no condensation on the windows, no open fridge, no draft. Just that pressure, thick and constant, like the entire apartment had inhaled and was refusing to exhale. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was from Jess, a friend I hadn't seen in years. She messaged me at 6:13 a.m. Hey, random. I had a weird dream about you. You were sitting in a room full of fog. You weren't alone. Are you okay? I stared at the screen for a long time. I hadn't told Jess anything about what was happening. Later that day, I started researching. I looked up everything I could about breath apparitions, temperature anomalies, even carbon monoxide poisoning. The latter was the only thing that made logical sense. But I'd already had the place inspected, and the landlord insisted the building was gas-free, electric everything. Still, I bought my own carbon monoxide detector. Plugged it in. Nothing. Then I found something else. A forum buried deep in a thread about old rental units. A user named Fogwatcher88 had posted 5 years ago about strange misty shapes in a walk-up apartment in a Midwest city. Not smoke. Not vapor, the post read. Feels alive. Fog that breathes back. There were no replies. The user hadn't posted since. I bookmarked the page and stared at it for hours. That night, I made a decision. I was going to stay in the apartment. No diner. No escape. I needed to see it through. I prepared. Set up 4 temperature sensors in the kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, and living room. Left my phone and a GoPro recording. I turned off every light. Sat in the middle of the living room with a flashlight in my lap and waited. Time crawled. Every creak in the floor above or below sounded thunderous. The building groaned like it hated being awake. At 3:06 a.m., the kitchen sensor beeped. I looked down at the monitor, 55 degrees Fahrenheit. The reading dropped by 10 degrees in seconds. Then the bathroom chimed in, 58 degrees Fahrenheit. I turned on the flashlight and scanned the kitchen. Nothing. But then behind the sink I saw it. A cloud, slowly forming. A breath without a mouth. I stepped closer, watching it pulse faintly as if it were struggling to stay in this world. It shimmered slightly in the flashlight's beam, trembling like it was afraid I'd blow it away. I raised the flashlight and whispered, "Who are you?" The fog contracted. It moved. Not like a breeze caught it, like it responded. It coiled inward, like it was tightening around something unseen. Then came the whisper. It wasn't in the room. It was in my ear. One word, stay. My skin went cold. Every nerve felt electrified. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. When I looked up again, the fog was gone. The sensors returned to normal temperatures. But the message remained. I didn't sleep. The next day, I dug through old records at the local public library. I figured if the landlord was hiding something, maybe someone else hadn't. I searched the building's address, found a small article from 1977. Tenant found dead in bathroom. No signs of struggle. No trauma. Autopsy inconclusive. Name, Adeline Moore. Age, 71. I dug deeper. Turns out Adeline was something of a recluse. The article said neighbors hadn't seen her in weeks and only called the landlord when water began leaking into the floor below. Police found her fully clothed in the bathtub. The water was cold. Her lungs were filled with air, not water. Asphyxiation was ruled out. They found breath condensation on the mirror. For distinct prints. More than one breath. That night, I brought a voice recorder and left it running in the bathroom while I sat in the living room. Around 3 a.m., I heard a soft clink like metal tapping porcelain. I waited. Didn't move. At 3:13 a.m., the door creaked open on its own. The light was off. Just darkness spilling out. When I checked the recording the next morning, I heard it clearly. Breathing. Then a second voice. Hoarse. Female. Why did you close the window? The hairs on my arms stood on end. I had never opened a window in that apartment. That same day, I reached out to the landlord again. This time I pushed. I mentioned Adeline Moore. His voice dropped. I didn't think you'd find that, he said quietly. Why didn't you tell me? She's been gone a long time. I didn't think it mattered. She hasn't left. He sighed, then said something I'll never forget. That apartment holds things. Not just people. Sounds. Moments. Even breath. They don't go away. I recorded our call. He told me more. About how tenants in 3C often complained of drafts with no source. Voices. Breath fog without cold. It's like the air remembers, he said. Like it exhales when no one else is around. I asked why he never got rid of the place. It won't let me. I haven't heard from him since. On July 22nd, something new happened. I returned home from getting groceries. The apartment was locked. Lights off. Everything normal. Except for the mirror in the bathroom. Words were written in fog, smeared gently by invisible fingers. He's in the air, I ran. Slept in my car that night. When I came back the next morning, the mirror was clean. But the sense of pressure, of breath held in, was stronger than ever. That evening, I invited Jess over. I didn't tell her everything, just said I needed someone to see something. She arrived around 9 p.m. By then, the house already felt strange again. The air was too still. We sat in the kitchen. I turned off the lights and asked her to watch the air near the faucet. At 2:44 a.m., it happened. The fog formed. Jess gasped. That's not possible, she said. It's not cold. How's it foggy? Then the whisper came. We both heard it. Not a word this time. Just a sigh. Long, slow. Close. Jess stood up. You're not imagining this, she said. I know. She left shortly after and called me an hour later, shaken. She said she could still smell something on her skin, like copper and dust, like air that had passed through lungs too many times. I didn't go to sleep that night. I waited. I sat by the window, watched my own breath fog the glass. But it wasn't my breath I was afraid of. It was the one I couldn't control. The one that kept forming in places I hadn't been. The one that lingered just long enough to show me it was still here. And I was starting to believe it wasn't just showing itself. It was learning. I thought I could handle it. After Jess saw the fog with her own eyes, I told myself maybe that was enough. Maybe just having a witness would break whatever spell the apartment had over me. Maybe things would stop. They didn't. They got worse. It started with the smell. The apartment began to carry a faint scent, something like iron and mildew, but not quite. It was strongest in the early hours of the morning. I tried everything, scrubbed every surface with bleach, poured baking soda down the drains, opened windows even when the heat made it unbearable. Nothing helped. And then the dreams returned. Not the surreal, shifting nightmares of before. These were clearer, more invasive. I find myself standing in my kitchen, but it was always darker than it should be. The lights wouldn't turn on, and something just out of sight was breathing long and deep. But the most disturbing part was what I began doing in the dreams. I wasn't just standing around. I was peeling up the floorboards, one by one, always the same two boards in the living room, near the coldest patch. In the dream, I'd remove them slowly with an old rusted crowbar, and then lean over the black void beneath. I never saw the bottom. I just listened. Each time, I heard whispering breath below the floor. And then I'd wake up, drenched in sweat, gasping, and always, the temperature by the floor would be lower than the rest of the room. Eventually, I gave in. On July 26th, I pried up the boards from my dream. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stand not knowing. I had to see if something was really down there. It wasn't easy. The wood fought me like it didn't want to be disturbed. But after 20 minutes, I managed to wedge up two of the boards. Beneath them was nothing. Just dust, cobwebs, and an empty crawl space about 2 feet deep. Except for one thing. An old leather strap. A shackle. At first, I thought it was just debris, but when I pulled it out, I realized it had been used. The leather was cracked, but still intact, and the metal cuff at the end was rusted shut. There was something dried on the inside. Dark. Flaky. Blood? I dropped it and stepped back, heart pounding. I didn't know what to do with it, so I put it in a trash bag and shoved it in the hallway closet. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. The next morning, I called Jess. Told her what I found. She didn't laugh. Didn't even try to rationalize it. She said, "You need to get out of there." I agreed. I packed a bag and went to stay at her place. I only meant to stay for a night. But on the second night, the breath followed me. It was around 3 a.m. again. I was in her guest room. Jess was asleep in the next room. The AC was off. I was lying on my back when I saw the fog form above me, just a faint puff, hovering like a cloud with nowhere to go. It twisted slightly, as if stirred by invisible lungs. I stared, frozen, until it drifted toward the door and disappeared under the crack. The next morning, Jess said she'd had a nightmare. She dreamed of a woman sitting at the foot of her bed, breathing heavily. She woke up gasping for air. I didn't see her, she said, but I could feel her weight on the mattress. I left that afternoon. Back in my apartment, everything felt quieter, but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet you hear before a storm, a held breath. The leather strap was gone. I tore the closet apart, checked every inch. Nothing, not even the trash bag. I thought I was losing my mind until I found the mirror fogged again. Different message this time. I breathed for him. No name, no explanation. I started digging deeper into the building's history. If Adeline had been the first, maybe there were more. I went to the county records office. Spent hours scanning microfiche. While I found it didn't make sense at first, dozens of complaints about that apartment going back decades. Tenants reporting breathing noises, unexplained fog, dreams of being smothered. But one name came up more than once. Harold Rusk. He lived in 3C in 1952. The records showed he was arrested, then released, then disappeared entirely. No forwarding address. No death certificate. I found an archived article about him in a local paper. Local man accused in disappearance of wife. Harold Rusk, 42, claims she evaporated. No evidence of foul play. Authorities suspicious due to presence of odd materials found under floorboards, including restraints and personal effects. The article mentioned one disturbing detail. Neighbors reported hearing constant wheezing coming through the vents, even after the apartment had been vacated. I brought this to Jess. She just stared at me and whispered, "How long has it been doing this to people?" We didn't know, but something told me it hadn't stopped. I decided to test something. That night, I set up my phone on a tripod and left it recording while I slept on the couch, across from the cold spot on the floor. I left the lights off. Around 2:57 a.m., the camera started to record something that made my blood go cold. At 3:01 a.m., the air above the floor shimmered. A faint cloud appeared like fog and began to pulse, expand, and contract, as if inhaling and exhaling. Then a shadow passed through the wall behind it. Not a person, just the outline of something humanoid and wrong. Long arms, crooked head, no feet. The phone battery died at 3:04, even though it was plugged in. I found it face down on the carpet the next morning. It wasn't until that evening I noticed what had changed in the living room. The two boards I pried up, they were back in place, perfectly nailed down. No gaps, no marks. I never put them back. I didn't know who or what did, but I was beginning to realize this wasn't just a haunting. It was something older, something intelligent, and it was still breathing. It never stopped, and somehow I'd started breathing with it. I didn't return to the apartment for almost a week after the boards nailed themselves shut. I couldn't bring myself to step inside. I kept seeing that fog, those shallow clouds rising and falling like they had lungs of their own. I kept replaying the video footage in my mind, especially the moment where that shadow passed behind the breathing fog and the camera abruptly went dead. Something had touched my home, something alive in its own impossible way. But the worst part, the part that kept waking me up in the middle of the night in cold sweats, wasn't what I saw on the screen. It was that I'd started breathing differently. At night, no matter where I slept, whether on Jess's couch or in the back seat of my car, I would find myself waking up in mid-breath, but not my own rhythm. It was slower, measured, as though someone else were filling my lungs for me. In, out, like I was synchronizing with something else. Something that wasn't sleeping. Just could see it wearing me down. She tried to get me to see a doctor or a priest. I declined both. I didn't want medicine. I didn't want prayers. I wanted answers. I needed to know what the hell had been haunting my apartment, and now it seemed haunting me. So I went back to the building. Not to my apartment. I didn't go near 3C. I went door to door, trying to find anyone who had lived there longer than me. It took 3 days before I met Mrs. Hardgrove. She lived in 5, a widow in her 70s with pale blue eyes and a smoker's rasp. When I asked her about my unit, she didn't blink. "You've seen the fog then," she said. It wasn't a question. I sat on her floral print couch while she poured black tea into trembling hands. She lit a cigarette and leaned back, staring at the ceiling like she was trying to calculate how much she should tell me. "That apartment's always had something in it," she said. "Long before you. Long before me, even. Used to be whispers about it back in the 50s. The Rusk man? He was only the first we heard about. They say his wife vanished. Others too. Room was empty more than occupied. Did anyone ever die in there? I asked. Oh, honey, plenty, but never publicly. Never with cause. Mostly just disappearances. Or they'd move out and kill themselves months later. Some folks lasted longer than others. Most never lasted a year. I asked her if anyone had experienced what I had, the breath of fog. She nodded. Same pattern. Always the same. Cold patches. Fog at night. Heavy breathing. Some folks said they dreamed about a woman lying beneath the floor. Breathing. Waiting. That word again. Waiting. I asked her who Adeline was. She blinked. Adeline Torres? Yes, I said. She left a journal behind. Mrs. Hargrove crushed her cigarette out with a shaky hand. Jesus. You found her journal? I nodded. She was the last tenant before me. She disappeared. Mrs. Hargrove leaned forward. She didn't disappear. They never do. She's still there. I didn't want to ask what she meant by that, but I did. She just said she never left the building. I pressed her for more, but she shut down after that. Refused to say anything else. Told me to leave, and when I hesitated, she snapped at me, screamed at me to get out. I left, shaken. Back at my car, I sat in the driver's seat staring at the brick building through the windshield. So many windows. So many stories stacked on top of each other. I tried to count how many of them were lit up. Only a handful, most of them dark. I wondered how many people had ever seen the fog. How many had woken up with someone or something breathing through them. The thought sent a chill down my spine. That night, I tried to stay at Jess's again. I shouldn't have. She was asleep when I got there. I lay down in the guest room and tried to keep my eyes open, but I was exhausted. Somewhere between 2:30 and 3 a.m., I fell asleep. When I woke up, the room was filled with fog. Not a patch this time, not a puff, but a full, roiling mist, thick enough that I couldn't see the ceiling fan. My heart thundered in my chest as I sat up, coughing. It smelled like damp wood and old skin, and that sound, breathing, was everywhere. Slow, heavy, wet, like something was breathing all around me, inside me. I stumbled into Jess's room and screamed when I saw her. She was lying perfectly still, eyes wide open, a thin strand of fog leaking from her mouth like breath in reverse. I shook her. She gasped suddenly, coughed hard, and stared at me in panic. I saw it, she whispered, shaking. It was crawling along the wall. It had no eyes. We left immediately. I didn't even pack a bag. I just drove. We booked a motel 2 towns over. But neither of us slept that night. The next morning, she begged me to go to the police, or a paranormal investigator, or anyone. But what would I say? There's a fog that breathes in my apartment. Who would believe me? So I went back one more time. Alone. The hallway was darker than usual. My door was slightly open. I hadn't left it that way. When I stepped inside, the floor groaned beneath me. Something had changed. The air was thicker, warmer. The cold spot was gone, because the cold wasn't in one place anymore. It was everywhere. I stepped toward the center of the living room and felt the breath wrap around me like a pressure wave. It wasn't just fog now. It was conscious, watching. I walked to the 2 floorboards I had once pulled up. They were gone. The floor had changed. A new section of the wood had been replaced, a trapdoor. Smaller, square like a cellar door. I didn't put it there. It wasn't even there the day before. I stood over it, my breath visible in the still air, and listened. There was no mistaking it now. Breathing. From underneath. Not gasps. Not whispers. A slow, steady inhale and exhale. And then a voice whispered from beneath the trapdoor, "Let me take the breath you don't want anymore." I ran. I didn't stop running until I hit the street. I didn't look back. That night, I slept in my car. Engine off. Windows up. I still woke up with fog on the inside of the glass. I tried to resettle, but nothing returned to normal. I crashed for a few nights in an Airbnb 3 towns over. I kept the door locked, the lights low, but every night I woke gasping for air. My lungs felt full of someone else's breath. I was sure I'd gone insane. On night 3, I dreamed in Technicolor clarity. I was walking into apartment 3C. The musty smell hit me as if I'd been there for years. The lights flickered, the fog pulsed in the hallway. But something strange had happened. There were charts, photographs, notes taped to the walls, an investigation. As I passed them, I saw faces. Missing persons. Adeline Moore, Harold Rusk's wife. Dozens more. Someone looks like me had tried to piece the mystery together. At the end of the hall, I saw myself sitting on the couch, breathing fog into the air. Then I woke up, crying in the dark. I booked a flight to a cabin in the woods. Needed distance. I lasted 2 nights. Night 1. The fog followed me into the bathroom mirror, one puff by the sink when I brushed my teeth, only a few feet from where I slept. Night 2. I woke to breathe in cold air. My breath fogged the ceiling. The fog formed around my head. I reached up. My hand passed through it, but it felt thicker than air. It shifted, pooling over my ear, whispering in a voice like an echo, "Don't forget." With that, I knew. It had imprinted on me. It followed me, and it remembered. Segment 5B, I returned home. That word tasted wrong on my tongue. I called every paranormal investigator I could find, but no one believed me. Airborne pathogen, carbon monoxide again. Everyone nudged me toward psychiatry. I balked at that. In desperation, I did something I never imagined I would. I tried self-exorcism. I read online rituals, burned sage, recited psalms, drew salt circles around my bed, but the fog soaked right through. The salt circle cracked, and the mirror fogged over with words I couldn't read before they faded. You can't expel air. The smoke from my sage wilted within seconds, as if snuffed by something unseen. I blew out the candle I lit during the ritual. It sputtered and died too soon. Now the fog was mocking me. Thicker, lingering not just in one room, it hovered over my shoulder all day. I could feel it breathing warm air behind me. I started to look different too. Friends commented on the way I glanced over my shoulder when I spoke. I looked pale, gaunt. My clothes began carrying that rusty metallic scent, iron and mildew, and I couldn't wash it away. On August 2nd, I found something in that investigation folder, buried in my photos, a thermal image of thick, cold air, thin column from ceiling to floor, breathing in pulses like lungs of the room. My blood ran cold. Segment 5C that night, I confronted it. I locked myself in the bathroom, small space, tile walls, no furniture. I taped sensors to the pipes, the mirror, the floor, and started speaking into the mirror, testing. Who are you? Why are you here? Show me. The fog didn't respond right away, but after 3 minutes, it gathered at the sink, swirling. Then it coalesced slowly into a faint outline, a woman's face. Mist that hardened into features, hollow eyes, skeletal nose, parted lips. The mirror fogged wildly. I felt breath on my neck. I whipped around. Nothing visible. We're of heaters. I looked back. The fog woman was smiling. Then she mouthed 3 words: leave or join. My knees buckled. I stumbled toward the sink. The faucets slammed open on their own, flooded the floor. I raised my hands. Stay away. That's when the mirror cracked in a long diagonal slice, and pieces of glass flaked away into the sink basin. The fog swelled so thick I couldn't breathe again. I bolted out, soaked and trembling, gasping in the hall. The air felt wrong again, each breath tight, damp, full of someone else's lungs. Segment 5D over the next week, I stopped going inside. Moved back to Jess's. We slept in separate rooms again. Each night, I woke wrapped in fog, so thick I could taste metal in my mouth. My phone glitched. Video recordings only showed darkness. Audio picked up muffled whispers. Notes I'd written in the dark all blurred. The fog erased them. I found one surviving note that scared me the most. It breathes with us now. Our lungs are shared on August 9th. I did something final. I returned to 3C with a chainsaw. I meant to tear holes in walls, break ceilings, expose whatever it was. I wanted to destroy the place. But I didn't make it 2 feet inside before the chainsaw motor stuttered and died. The lights flickered and the air slammed against me. I fell backward onto the floor. The fog rose under my face. I scrambled away, gagging. In the silence that followed, I heard words again. He opened it for us. And then something else. Generic laughter. Beware, it sounded like tiny lungs exhaling in mock delight. I fled. That night, I wrote one last message in that investigation folder. I can't fight this alone. That night, I fell asleep holding the leather strap I found beneath the floorboards. When I woke up, I found it clipped around my wrist, tight, but I don't remember putting it on. Certainly. Here is part 6, the final and longest part of the horror story Breath Fog in a Room with No Cold. This conclusion brings everything together with maximum psychological and supernatural horror in a chilling, unforgettable resolution. The last days before I disappeared felt like living underwater. Every breath I took was borrowed, shallow, slipping through lungs that no longer felt fully my own. The leather strap I found beneath the floorboards, now fused to my wrist, was a constant reminder I was trapped. Not just in the apartment, but in something far older and darker. The fog had become my shadow, following me relentlessly, filling every space, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. On August 15th, Jess came over, determined to help. She was the only person left who believed me. She wanted to take me away, to a hospital, a doctor, a priest, anywhere but the apartment. But I couldn't leave. I couldn't escape. The moment I stepped outside 3C's door, the fog rolled in like a tidal wave, wrapping around me, squeezing air from my lungs. I gasped and felt my knees. I'm not letting you leave, it breathed. We stood there, just pleading, me choking, caught between worlds. I told her everything, the dreams, the floorboards, the strap, the whispered words. She held my hand as we went inside. The apartment had changed again. The trapdoor beneath the floor was open wide, revealing a pit so deep no light reached its bottom. The air pouring out of it was ice cold, smelling of damp earth and old sorrow. From the shadows beneath, I heard a voice, the same voice that had haunted my nightmares and whispers. Welcome home. I felt myself pulled forward, the fog swallowing me whole. In that darkness beneath the floor, time lost meaning. I saw the faces of the vanished, the tenants, Adeline, Harold's wife, trapped in the breath between worlds, waiting. I understood then. The apartment was a prison. The breath was a curse. A cycle of capture and release, of bodies fading, replaced by others trapped in the fog. The leather strap burned into my wrist, a mark that bound me. I fought to resist, but the breath was patient. It inhaled through me. It exhaled from me. I became the breath. I became the fog. Jess screamed for me, but I was gone. The last thing I heard before darkness claimed me was the chilling whisper through the keyhole of my mind. Now you breathe for us all. I never left the apartment, and neither will anyone else. Because when the breath comes for you, there is no escape. You only learn to breathe differently.